The message came in just after I finished helping a customer zip up a spring coat at my clothing studio. I'm leaving you for a 21-year-old girl and took all the money out of our joint account. I didn't flinch. My voice didn't crack. I smiled as I handed Mrs. Halpern her receipt and complimented her new shoes. The only visible sign that my husband of 13 years had just torched our marriage via text message was the tiniest twitch at the corner of my mouth. Once Mrs. Halpern was out the door, her dress wrapped in crisp white paper with our signature copper seal, I pulled out my phone and replied. Best of luck, Kyle. My name is Juliet, and at 41, I had just received the most juvenile farewell in history. Kyle was likely basking in his moment, picturing me weeping in the back room, devastated by his dramatic departure. But instead, I was calmly flipping the closed sign on the door of Indigo Row, the boutique I'd spent nearly a decade building in Portland's Arts District. The signs had been there for a while, late meetings that never matched his pay stubs, the sudden surge in cologne, his odd obsession with buying new sneakers. 2 months ago, I'd found a hotel key card in his jacket pocket. He told me it was from a conference. I didn't argue. I just opened a new bank account the next day. When he floated the idea of streamlining our finances soon after, combining everything, I smiled and said it was a great idea. Meanwhile, I transferred every penny of my savings into the new account and made sure our joint account had just enough in it to keep things looking normal. That account? The one he'd just emptied? It had 2 months' worth of deposits. The real money, along with a full ledger of his shady transactions over the past year, was already safe and sound. My phone buzzed again. Don't try to talk me out of this. Aubrey and I fly out tomorrow. I'll get my stuff later. Aubrey. The temp assistant at his design firm. I'd met her at their team retreat last fall, barely out of college, overly impressed by Kyle's painfully rehearsed stories, always hovering a little too close. I didn't reply. Instead, I called the attorney I'd been working with since January, when the hotel bills first started piling up. It's time, I said. He finally made a move, she asked. Yep. I'll file everything tomorrow. Want him served in LA? Let him enjoy his fantasy a little longer. We'll time it right. A third text from Kyle came through, even more condescending than the last. You'll be okay. You've still got your little store to keep you busy. And you've never been great with money anyway. My little store. The one that pulled in more revenue last year than Kyle's job ever had. The one I owned outright, with separate books, tax filings, and brand rights. The one he never bothered to understand. I smiled, picturing the cease and desist and property division notices that would greet him in his new downtown loft. That evening, I stayed in the house, my house. I'd inherited it from my great-aunt, and thankfully never added Kyle to the title, despite his repeated pushes to make it ours. While organizing documents for my attorney, I stumbled across our wedding album. Kyle looked like a completely different man then, softer, more grounded. Before the ego, the flashy sneakers, and the desperation to prove he was still young. Let him run. Let him think he won. Because I'm not just rebuilding. I'm thriving. Kyle had started wearing shirts that clung too tightly to his softening midsection, hoping no one would notice the paunch he'd acquired during his newfound gym rat phase. He started speaking in half-understood slang, sounding completely absurd as he tried to fit in with the 20-somethings in his office. My phone kept buzzing. Each message from him was more smug, more patronizing than the last. Been planning this for months. Aubrey gets me in ways you never did. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll meet someone closer to your age. Already told my family, we grew apart. Nobody's at fault here, really. I screenshotted every single one. Each text went neatly into the growing evidence folder I'd started 3 months ago. Let him talk. Let him brag. My lawyer was going to love his little confessions, especially the next gem. By the way, I used the joint card for our flights and hotel. Think of it as my parting gift. LOL. Perfect. I called the credit card company. This is Mrs. Harrison, I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately. The agent, Melody, couldn't have sounded more helpful if she tried. Of course, ma'am. Can you identify the charges? 2 first-class tickets to LA, booked today. Also hotel charges at the Argent Palm downtown. I'll also need to remove my husband, Kyle Harrison, as an authorized user. Do you have documentation? Text messages from him admitting to using the joint card to book a romantic getaway with his girlfriend after emptying our account. There was a brief pause before Melody responded, her tone still professional, but now laced with the unmistakable edge of satisfaction. I'll cancel the charges immediately, and yes, please forward the messages for our records. The tickets and hotel will be voided by the morning. I ended the call just as another message came through. Don't worry about the house. You can stay there until you find something smaller. That one actually made me laugh out loud. Kyle really thought he had a say in my home? The one I inherited from Great Aunt Ruth? The one that was in my name and mine alone? His ego had clearly swelled to the point where reality had stopped registering altogether. Another ping. And I know the shop means a lot to you. We can talk about a fair buyout for my half. His half? Of Indigo Row? The boutique I had built from the ground up, funded entirely by me and my grandmother's inheritance? The same business he used to mock, calling it a cute little hobby, whenever I worked late or missed dinner to meet a vendor? I walked to the kitchen and opened the bottle of Bordeaux I'd been saving for a special occasion. This felt like the moment. I poured a glass and settled into the armchair by the window, watching the lights flicker over the city. Tomorrow, Kyle was going to get a crash course in property law, asset division, and the limits of his self-importance. But tonight? Tonight, I was going to enjoy the peace. The silence of a house no longer filled with his sighs of disapproval, his passive-aggressive jabs, or his shallow declarations of love. The next morning, the texts started pouring in fast and angry. What did you do to the credit card? The airline says our tickets are void. The hotel canceled our reservation. You're being petty and vindictive, Juliet. No, Kyle. This wasn't petty. This was precise. This was earned. And it was just the beginning. Answer me. That was the last text I saw before I silenced my phone and slid it into the pocket of my apron. It was Friday, always the busiest day at Indigo Row, and I had a new shipment of designer handbags to unpack and display. Life doesn't stop just because your husband runs off with the receptionist half his age. Around noon, the shop was buzzing with regulars and a few new faces. While I was steaming a silk blouse for the window mannequin, the phone rang. Juliet, dear, it's Margaret. Kyle told us everything. Ah. His mother. I put her on speaker and continued arranging the display. He said you've been controlling, cold. That you pushed him away. And now, he says you're being vindictive, messing up his travel plans. I didn't stop working. Did he also mention draining our joint account and using the credit card to book a vacation for him and his girlfriend? Silence. Then, a quieter, well, he said you left him no choice. That you weren't emotionally available. Margaret, I have his texts. Would you like me to read the one where he laughs about stealing our money? Or maybe the one where he mocks my age? Another pause. He did seem a bit cruel. I told him that message was unnecessary. I appreciate the call, Margaret. I really do. But my attorney advised me to limit contact with Kyle and his family during the legal proceedings. Proceedings? Yes. Goodbye, Margaret. By late afternoon, word had trickled through our shared social circles. Kyle's sister Amanda was apparently fanning the flames. Gossip spread quickly when fueled by family drama. From what I'd heard, Kyle and Aubrey were holed up in a budget motel near the Portland airport, their luxury plans derailed. His personal credit cards had all been declined. Apparently, he hadn't mentioned to Aubrey that those cards had been maxed out for months, a detail I'd quietly noted when I started reviewing our financials 6 weeks ago. Another red flag, ignored until now. That evening, my lawyer called with an update. We're scheduled for an emergency hearing on Monday. With the documentation you provided, his confession about emptying the account and the credit card fraud, we're in a strong position to freeze remaining marital assets. Has he been served yet? I asked. Not yet. But we located their motel. The papers will be delivered tomorrow morning. She paused, then chuckled. Also, Aubrey's social media has been enlightening. She's been posting nonstop since yesterday. Pictures of takeout in plastic containers, a sad motel room, and quite a few passive-aggressive jabs at you. Screenshots are on the way. I smiled. Kyle had been so obsessed with his big dramatic exit, he didn't realize how loud his trail had become. I had hotel receipts, dinner bills, even text messages spelling out his plan like he thought I was too naive to notice. Then my phone buzzed again. You think you're clever? I made copies of all the boutique's financial records. Half that business is mine. I calmly forwarded the message to my attorney. Another misstep. Let him scream into the void about his half of Indigo Row, a business I built alone, financed alone, and filed as an LLC in my name before we were even married. Sometimes, the best revenge is being thoroughly, quietly prepared. Monday arrived with the weight of justice hanging in the air. Kyle showed up wearing designer jeans far too tight, a blazer that tried too hard, and sunglasses indoors, clearly his new uniform. Aubrey waited outside the courthouse, scrolling through her phone, looking uncomfortable under the unfiltered morning light. Inside, my lawyer presented everything, the texts, the receipts, the credit card records. Kyle had made it easy, gleefully admitting to everything in writing. I sat silently, composed. Calm. The storm he'd started was now his to weather. Apparently, living on a receptionist's salary in a cramped studio apartment wasn't the glamorous escape Kyle had imagined. Reality had arrived, loud, uncomfortable, and very much unpaid. Soon, his family started reaching out again. This time, their tone had changed, markedly different from the cold accusations they'd hurled at me only weeks ago. We had no idea, his sister Amanda admitted during a hushed call. He told us you were cold, controlling, that he needed to escape. But then we saw the texts. The ones where he laughed about draining the account. The bragging. That's not the brother I thought I knew. His mother called too. Crying this time. The things he said about your age, about replacing you. I didn't raise him to talk like that. I thought I raised him better. I let the calls go to voicemail. Their support might have meant something weeks ago, back when they believed him without question. But now, it just felt like rats deserting a sinking ship. Meanwhile, Indigo Row was thriving, ironic, really. Word had spread locally about my situation. A few newsy whispers from customers, a subtle mention in a lifestyle blog. Women came in, clearly curious, but mostly supportive. Some shopped just to show solidarity, and most left with far more than they'd originally planned. My ex tried something similar, one woman said as she clutched a new leather handbag. Thought he'd take everything in the divorce. Men like that never expect us to be smarter than them. She gave me a knowing smile. I gave her an extra spritz of our boutique's signature fragrance and a quiet nod. Kyle, of course, hadn't stopped texting. The messages ranged wildly, anger one moment, false remorse the next. You've ruined everything. I never meant to hurt you. You'll regret being so vindictive. Can't we work something out? That business would be nothing without my support. Each message was quietly forwarded to my lawyer, then deleted from my phone. Let him keep digging his own grave, I wasn't about to stop him. Through mutual contacts and a few very open social media posts, I learned that things weren't going well between him and Aubrey either. The novelty had worn off. Turns out, a man twice your age who can't pay rent doesn't shine as brightly outside of hotel rooms and whispered office gossip. She's been posting a lot, my lawyer said during an update call. Toxic relationships. Red flags. Learning experiences. She even removed her relationship status this morning. I almost felt sorry for Kyle. Almost. But then I remembered that LOL he sent after admitting he'd emptied our account. The casual cruelty. The smug comments about my age and my business. The way he assumed I'd crumble. And instead of pity, I felt pride. Pride in my instincts. In the quiet strength I'd summoned to prepare for the worst. In the way I'd protected what was mine while he thought I wasn't paying attention. By the time we arrived at the final divorce hearing, Kyle looked like a shadow of the man he used to be. The cocky smirk was gone. His hair was unkempt, his clothes were the same old business casual he'd worn before his reinvention. Apparently, he'd returned the designer wardrobe. Every penny counted now that the court had ordered him to repay the stolen funds. Melissa wasn't there. Rumor had it she'd moved on, to a new co-worker her own age. Sensible. Employed. Baggage-free. Kyle's lawyer looked like she hadn't slept in days, undoubtedly from trying, and failing, to poke holes in the airtight records I'd provided. The boutique's ownership was undeniable. My home? Proven separate property. The finances? Clear, clean, and in my name. And Kyle? Out of moves. The victory wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I just stood tall in that courtroom, calm and resolute, finally seeing the end of the storm he had created. And the beginning of something much, much better. Your Honor, Kyle's lawyer tried one last time, desperation creeping into his voice. Despite the documentation proving separate property, my client believes he contributed to the growth of his wife's business through emotional and moral support. My attorney didn't even glance up from her notes. Moral support, she repeated. You mean like these text messages, where he refers to Indigo Row as her little shop? Or these social media posts, calling it her expensive hobby? The judge sighed, clearly done with the circus. The final ruling came down exactly as we'd expected. I retained ownership of the boutique, the house, and all separate assets. Kyle was awarded his personal belongings, a few outdated electronics, and his car, whose value was less than the remaining loan on it. As we stepped into the hallway outside the courtroom, Kyle turned to me, his voice a harsh whisper. You've destroyed me. I met his eyes, unflinching. No, Kyle. You destroyed you. I just made sure you couldn't take me down with you. His mother was waiting near the exit, keys in hand, ready to drive him to her house, his new home, at 45 years old. The irony was delicious. The man who had mocked my age, who ran off to start fresh with a woman 20 years his junior, was now back in his childhood bedroom. He gave me one last glare. You planned this all along. You knew it would end like this. No, I said calmly, slipping my sunglasses on. I just paid attention. And unlike you, I understand the value of good records. Margaret stepped between us, clearly mortified. That's enough, Kyle. You've embarrassed yourself enough already. As they walked off toward the parking lot, I could hear her lecturing him. What were you thinking? A 21-year-old receptionist? Emptying accounts? Those awful texts. I watched them disappear around the corner and felt nothing but relief. Kyle had thought he was crafting the final chapter of our story with one cruel, smug message. Instead, he'd only triggered the plans I had quietly put into motion. My phone buzzed, not from Kyle this time, but with fresh order notifications from the Indigo Row website. Life was moving forward. Just not in the direction he had imagined. 6 months later, the boutique had expanded to a second location across town. A larger space in the Pearl District, perfect for our growing customer base. The irony wasn't lost on me. Kyle, who once scoffed at my long hours and called it playing shop, now had a front-row seat to my success, from the guest room at his parents' house. I'd hired 3 new employees, launched an e-commerce platform that had taken off faster than expected, and secured a feature in a regional fashion magazine. Meanwhile, bits and pieces of Kyle's new reality trickled back to me through mutual acquaintances. He'd tried online dating. Women his age weren't interested in a man who lived with his mother. The younger ones? Most had already heard the rumors, thanks in part to Aubrey, who had apparently shared screenshots of his desperate post-breakup messages, complete with cringe-worthy apologies and promises to start over. His professional life didn't fare much better. The company he'd once bragged about climbing through had launched an internal HR investigation into his relationship with a subordinate. It resulted in a formal reprimand. The promotion he'd expected? It went to someone else, a manager without a history of sleeping with receptionists. He tried to claim age discrimination, Amanda told me, trying to keep a straight face. As if the reason no one wants to promote him is because he's 45, not because he blew up his life for a woman who dumped him after 2 months. I didn't laugh. But I did smile. Because I was no longer just surviving. I was building, stronger, smarter, and without anyone holding me back. HR is punishing him for dating someone younger, Amanda said during an unexpected visit to Indigo Row. At least, that's what Kyle's telling everyone. HR just added the complaint to his file. I hadn't expected to see his sister in the boutique again, especially not after the messy fallout. But her presence said everything. Kyle had alienated even the people who once stood firmly in his corner. She trailed her fingers over a pale blue silk scarf, eyes flickering with something like regret. I know we didn't support you at first, she admitted. He played the victim so well, and we believed him. But watching how he spiraled afterward. I'm ashamed we ever doubted you. I simply nodded, offering her a quiet kindness I wouldn't have been capable of a year ago. My attorney kept me in the loop with Kyle's ongoing, desperate attempts to contest the divorce settlement. Each petition was swiftly denied. His claims of unfair distribution were thrown out, especially with the mountain of evidence he'd practically gift-wrapped for the court. He actually tried to argue that the text about draining the account was a joke, my lawyer told me during one check-in. The judge asked if adding LOL made financial theft legal. We both laughed. Meanwhile, Indigo Row kept climbing. What began as whispers of support had evolved into something bigger. Local business magazines requested interviews, not about my failed marriage, but about my success, my savvy, and my strategy. I wasn't being cast as the scorned wife. I was being seen as a businesswoman who had weathered a storm and built something enduring. Young entrepreneurs began reaching out, eager to learn how I'd managed to protect myself. The best protection is preparation, I told one aspiring designer who reminded me a bit too much of Aubrey. And always, trust your instincts. Kyle's mother called occasionally. Usually after he'd made another destructive decision. Online gambling. A failed crypto scheme. A pyramid program selling health shakes and financial freedom. We offered to help him, she sighed on one call. His father and I told him we'd help him get back on his feet if he just took any responsibility. But he's still blaming everyone. You. Aubrey. His company. Even the judge. I listened politely. But I kept my distance. Their family drama was no longer mine to manage. That chapter was closed. My life had shifted toward expansion plans for a third boutique, and the launch of a luxury accessories line I'd been quietly developing. My days were full, my vision focused, my energy intact. The only remnant of Kyle in my world was a framed screenshot that hung behind my desk. His final text before I blocked his number. Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age. Beneath the frame sat my latest award for Outstanding Female Entrepreneur of the Year. It made me smile every time I walked past it. Because sometimes, the best revenge really is success, earned, celebrated, and entirely your own. Exactly 1 year after the divorce was finalized, I hosted the grand opening of my third Indigo Row location. Local media arrived, photographers buzzing, champagne flowing. The headline wasn't about heartbreak, it was about expansion, vision, and grit. And that's when she walked in. Aubrey. She looked even younger than I remembered, or maybe I just felt that much stronger now. Her heels clicked awkwardly on the polished floor as she approached, clutching her handbag like a shield. I owe you an apology, she said, her voice quiet. I believed everything he told me. About how you were cold. Controlling. I waited. I wanted to hear the rest. How you didn't support his dreams, Aubrey continued, voice soft, eyes flicking around the boutique. Then I watched him try the same manipulation tactics on me. Guilt trips, mood swings, blaming everyone else when things got hard. I adjusted a row of designer sunglasses on the display near the window. Those weren't dreams, Aubrey, I said without looking up. They were escapes. There's a difference. She exhaled, a little too sharply. Yeah. I know that now. She hesitated, then added, after you froze the accounts, he tried to move into my studio apartment. Thought it would be temporary. But after 2 weeks of him complaining about my closet space and suggesting I take out a loan for a bigger place, I finally got it. I understood what you meant about dreams versus escapes. I chuckled, shaking my head. Let me guess, he had big plans, but no way to fund any of them? Exactly. She almost smiled. Everything was going to work out once his investments paid off. Once that promotion came through. Once his cryptocurrency definitely increased in value. She rolled her eyes. I'm dating someone now. Someone my own age. We've got student loans and a tiny apartment, but at least it's real. We're building something together. She looked lighter then, relieved. Like she'd finally stepped out of a fog. After she left, my assistant manager, Tasha, leaned in with wide eyes. Was that the girlfriend? No, I said with a small smile. That was just another woman who learned the same lesson I did. I glanced across the boutique at a young couple looking through our latest collection of handbags. Speaking of lessons, I turned to Tasha. Let's talk through your idea for the new accessories line. I think there's something really special there. Indigo Row wasn't just a business anymore. It had become a symbol, for me, for my team, for the women who walked through our doors. A symbol of resilience, self-respect, and what's possible when you prepare wisely and refuse to be underestimated. Young entrepreneurs still reached out regularly. And whenever they asked for advice, I always started with this. Protect your assets. Trust your instincts. And don't let anyone convince you your ambition is a problem. A few weeks later, I got one final call from Kyle's mother. This time, it wasn't to defend him. It was to thank me. You taught our family something important, she said gently. About enabling bad behavior. About how easy it is to confuse support with excuses. Kyle's still at home. Still blaming everyone but himself. But we're not shielding him anymore. That's your legacy to us, Juliet. You showed us the difference. After we hung up, I sat quietly with those words for a moment. Legacy. Kyle had tried to shrink me. Replace me. Strip me of everything I'd built. Instead, all he'd done was give me more fuel. More clarity. More strength. I reviewed the final layout plans for our 4th boutique location, this one in Seattle. Then my phone buzzed. A message from my lawyer. Kyle just filed another petition to revisit the settlement. Judge dismissed it on the spot. Ordered him to pay your court costs. Thought you'd enjoy that. I smiled, picturing him in his childhood bedroom, still clinging to the fantasy that this story wasn't over. But it had ended the moment he underestimated me. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. 2 years after Kyle's infamous LOL text, I received an invitation to speak at a women's business leadership conference. The topic wasn't betrayal. It wasn't even divorce. It was resilience in business. Building smart. Protecting what's yours. My story had shifted, from cautionary tale to case study. From survival to inspiration. During the Q&A, a woman stood up and asked, "What's the biggest lesson you learned from everything you went through?" I didn't hesitate. Keeping business and personal finances separate, the woman in the audience said during the Q&A, "My husband says I'm being paranoid, that marriage means sharing everything." I smiled gently, familiar with that refrain. My ex-husband said the same thing, I replied. Right up until he tried to claim half my business in the divorce. Trust your instincts. Protection isn't paranoia, it's preparation. The audience nodded. I saw women exchange glances, some with a spark of understanding, others with dawning resolve. That one moment alone made the years of quiet planning, heartbreak, and rebuilding worth it. The Indigo Row boutique chain had grown to 5 locations. What Kyle had once mocked as my little shop now employed over 30 people and had been featured in multiple national fashion and business magazines. Through mutual friends, I'd heard Kyle had finally moved out of his parents' house and into a small apartment, above someone's garage, apparently. He'd taken a lower-paying job after his former company downsized and eliminated his position during a restructuring. His dating profile still listed him as young at heart, though the photo looked like it had been taken a decade ago. Ironically, Aubrey, once the other woman, had become a regular at my original boutique. She'd earned her business degree and now ran her own social media consulting agency. You inspired me, she told me one afternoon while picking out a gift for a client. You showed me a woman can build something real, instead of falling for someone else's empty promises. That mattered more than any courtroom win. I still kept that message from Kyle, framed in my office. Not as a painful reminder, but as a badge of honor. His final text. Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age. Below it hung a sleek black sign. Success is the best revenge. At the 5-year anniversary celebration of my flagship store, I stood before a crowd of employees, longtime customers, and community supporters. The boutique had been transformed for the night, string lights, champagne flutes, music humming in the background. What began as a modest space was now the heart of a thriving business empire. To my surprise, Kyle's mother attended, uninvited, but polite. She waited until most of the crowd had drifted away before approaching. I saw Kyle yesterday, she said softly, adjusting the collar of her designer jacket, one she'd bought from my store. He was talking about his glory days. About the life he could have had. But he still doesn't get it. He didn't lose everything in the divorce, he threw it away. I nodded but said nothing. The truth didn't need to be repeated. I thought back to that original text. The casual cruelty. The arrogance. The certainty that I would fall apart. Instead, I had risen. And each boutique location was a brick in the foundation of something solid, proof that when women stop dimming their light to make others comfortable, we shine. As I helped my new sales associate, coincidentally also named Melissa, navigate our updated inventory system, I caught my reflection in the boutique's front window. And I saw it clearly, not a woman getting older, but one growing wiser. Stronger. Unstoppable. Kyle's text had been meant as an ending. But it wasn't. It was just the beginning. Not just for me. But for every woman who has ever read my story and finally realized, she deserves more than someone else's midlife crisis. If my story resonated with you, I ask only this, don't let it end with me. Share it. Talk about it. Comment below and tell me what part hit home. Tell me about your, Kyle, your little shop, your turning point. We need to stop whispering about survival and start celebrating it. Your words, your support, could help another woman realize she's not alone, that her instincts are valid, and that protecting what she's built isn't selfish, it's smart. Leave a message, share your thoughts, or just drop a line reminding other women that they can rise, too. Because every voice matters, and together, we make each other stronger. To those of you who've followed my journey, thank you. I didn't rebuild my life in a vacuum. I had silent supporters, kind strangers, women who saw me even when I couldn't see myself. Your belief, your strength, your stories have meant more than you know. If you saw strength in me, it's because it already lives in you. Keep standing tall, keep moving forward, and don't let anyone shrink your vision. You deserve more than survival. You deserve success. And if you're in a place where the ground feels shaky, let me offer this: trust your instincts, protect your peace, and never apologize for preparing. Keep your business and personal life separate, not because you expect betrayal, but because you honor your own work enough to safeguard it. You are not paranoid. You are powerful. Let people call you cold, distant, calculating. If it means you're preserving your foundation, let them. Because when the storm comes, and it always does, it's the ones who built wisely that remain standing. Let my story be a mirror and a map, a reminder of who you already are, and everything you still have time to become.